Okay, we're going to see how this goes again. You can see Bluey a little better. And this fella, Sherlock, some of you have heard of him, some of you have not. Might be a pain in the butt time to time. I definitely need to pick me up for some reason. My brain, my neurodivergent ADHD brain is fighting me today, even though I'm getting a lot of stuff done. I need to fight for eating something halfway decent for dinner. Either way. So let's continue. We're on this one, chapter 2. I'm gonna have to see how this goes, how my timing goes in this and number of chapters. I'm gonna have to look, especially if I can do all of the 2 halves, because there's through the looking glass and such. So we shall see about that, because I would definitely, if I can figure out how to, and if the whole book club concept here lines up with that, and if Gidwitz and such, or even any other of my potential authors, if I can do a different one instead, work well, I can do a good one for October, which my former students of the Rainbow Stone, they know what that means, my Pepto buddies, will know about that one. It is in fact kid friendly. It just depends on the kid and the kid, and it always warns you before it gets going in certain ways if we get to do that one, because it is made like that, which really even draws the kids in more, because they're like, wait, no, babysitter, oh, keep reading, I want to know what happens. And it gives them some real context for things that are actually real from history in terms of our stories that we keep telling, in that they don't realize. You might think of just boring little kid stuff that they always hear in the background of things. But yeah, let's see. I hope it doesn't block off, because my storage, I tried to adjust that so it wouldn't happen. So let's see. Otherwise we'll have to sort out a different way to do this, or use my phone, which I hope I don't, because that just might not be as easy for this. But let's see. Yes, so remember, this chapter is called The Pool of Tears. So she's been eating the Eat Me. So let's see how that worked out. Because right now we have this image. Curiouser and curiouser, cried Alice. She was so much surprised that for the moment she quite forgot how to speak good English. Now I'm opening out like the largest telescope that ever was, if you can imagine. Goodbye, feet. Makes sense. For when she looked down at her feet, they seemed to be almost out of sight. They were getting so far off. Oh, my poor little feet. I wonder who will put on your shoes and stockings for you now, dears. I'm sure I shan't be able to. I shall be a great deal too far off to trouble myself about you. You must manage the best you can, the way you can, but I must be kind to them, thought Alice, or perhaps they won't walk the way I want them to go. Let me see. I'll give them a new pair of boots every Christmas. Interesting. Boots is her option. But then again, I guess if you're in winter, you'll definitely want boots. And of course, being from Texas, some of my friends and I know boots can be particularly nice. And those of you in colder weather than Texas tends to get, well, now some winter boots especially can be very nice. Kind of makes you wonder. You want to ask your taller friends and relatives and people you know, hey, how long is it since you've been like real close to your feet? And then when you look at a little baby, you'll be like, huh. You might ask them, what's it like being so close to your feet? Not in a mean way. Like, obviously you can joke with certain people, but certain people are sensitive about that. But like when they're obviously like a really little kid compared to you, and they know that, like, it's not because they're actually short comparatively to everything else in their age, but they're short in terms of, say you're in 5th grade and they're a 4-year-old, you might ask, and you might point that out, saying, I'm so far from my feet, what's it like being so close to yours? And just see. Oh, she's crying. And she went on planning to herself how she would manage it. They must go by the carrier, she thought, and how funny it'll seem sending presents to one's own feet, and how odd the directions will look. Carrier being like the mail carrier, the post. Like when you send it by UPS or USPS, the US Postal Service, or FedEx, when Amazon sends packages, things like that. Alice's right foot, Esquire, hearthrug being a rug by the hearth, the fireplace, because that's the hearth where you heat yourself up and heat up the house. Near the fender, with Alice's love. Oh dear, what nonsense I'm talking. Just at this moment, her head struck against the roof of the hall. In fact, she was now rather more than 9 feet high, and she at once took up the little golden key and hurried off to the garden door. Poor Alice! It was as much as she could do, lying down on the one side to look through into the garden with one eye. But to get through was more hopeless than ever. She sat down and began to cry again. Must be what we saw. You ought to be ashamed of yourself, said Alice. A great girl like you, she might well say this, to go on crying this way. Stop this moment, I tell you. I will say sometimes it is okay to cry, and don't be so mean to yourself, but depends on the situation and what's going on. But she went on all the same, shedding gallons of tears until there was a large pool all around her, about 4 inches deep and reaching half down the hall. After a time, she heard a little pattering of feet in the distance, and hastily she dried her eyes to see what was coming. It was the White Rabbit returning, splendidly dressed with a pair of white kid gloves in one hand and a large fan in the other. He came trotting along in a great hurry, muttering to himself as he came along, "Oh, the Duchess! Oh, won't she be savage if I keep her waiting?" The Duchess. Alice felt so desperate that she was ready to ask help of anyone. So when the rabbit came near her, she began in a low, timid voice, kind of like shy, is what timid is. "If you please, sir." The rabbit started being like, which is me, if you've ever seen The Vine. "Ah! You could have dropped my croissant." People know me. Apologies if I give that jolt, because I definitely will. Let's see, dropped the white kid gloves and the fan and scurried away into the darkness as hard as he could go. Now, I want to look at two of these words, because I want to get that in there. Let me see for a moment. You might have heard Duchess as a like a kind of like a legal term in sense, like royalty, kind of like Duchess of Edinburgh. I believe the People's Princess, Princess Diana, was Duchess of Wales or some such. In that sense, it's a title they give people. And if you hear about a duke, that's the boy version of a duchess. And you might have heard, if any of y'all have watched Aristocats, the mom cat, the white one, her name is Duchess. Okay, so a duchess is a kind of like a princess, but instead of a kingdom, she's in charge of a smaller area called a duchy. She can also be the wife of a duke, who is like a prince or noble leader. So you can think of a duchess as a very important lady in royalty or nobility. Someone fancy who lives in castles, wears crowns or tiaras, and has an important title. Like I said, Duchess of Wales. So instead of like the whole kingdom, it's just, okay, this part. So it kind of makes you wonder what that would look like if we used our places in Texas, what kind of place they would use for that. Like, would it just be like the Austin itself, the Austin area, a county like Leander, Williamson County, because that's where Leander is, or like, East Texas or all of Texas, or would Texas be too big? But like, say something like Kentucky, or a smaller one like New York, be something they could feasibly do? Be interesting to know. The other word I wanted to look at was how he was walking, because trotting I want you to, trotting is usually described as something, usually you describe a horse to do that. But like we know our words, like we walk, we tiptoe, we jog, which is like slower running, we know that. But trotting is like harder to get, but clearly he's in a hurry because it describes it that way. But I want y'all to have the right wording here. It's the way of trotting is the way of an animal, like a horse. Okay, like I said, moves when it's going faster than walking but slower than running. So I guess it's how an animal, probably particularly a four-legged animal, I assume. Obviously, in this case, he's running on two legs because he's more personified. The word for when you give something human traits that isn't actually human. The traits of a person, personified, made into a person. But I guess it'd be something you probably would more likely use for something that has four legs. So you'd be less likely to say a monkey is trotting if it's like a chimp, if it's running with, even though it does use its like fists, it's in a very different way, or a gorilla than really what you imagine like a cat, like Sherlock or something would do, or like they could, because their animals use the word trot, but you probably really wouldn't in a sense because they walk on two legs, like maybe Socks. When Socks is still younger and walking on all fours, you'd say trot when they're not kind of jogging in a sense. But yeah. So you trot to catch up. So when your dog or cat or somebody, something like that, tries to catch up with you, but isn't like busting out in a full run, just going a little bit faster, trotting. So you could describe yourself as trotting if you just want to be a little more different and use an animal term here. Okay. Alice took up the fan and gloves, and as the hall was very hot, she kept fanning herself all the time and went on talking. Dear, dear, how queer everything is. Queer being weird and just, you just don't get it. That's just odd. It's, there's something, or like you come to a place and you're like, does something seem a little bit queer today? Like it just seems a little weird, or does the teacher seem a little queer today? Like there's just, and usually you'd say that not necessarily, if you're talking about your teacher that you normally have, you wouldn't necessarily, like if your teacher's weird, like I am, you would be like, well, duh, it's the rainbow teacher who bunny ears everybody. She's always queer, but you would probably use it more likely when you're asking it in that way, when like, she doesn't seem like herself. Like it's like if me showed up in complete black and white, the most robotic person ever, no fun at all, most basic, normal, everything, then you might say, for me, I'm acting queer. Instead of the normal term of using queer, way of using queer, in which case you're just saying I'm queer and compared to everybody else, because I'm just not the way everybody else is. And we're all queer in our own way. Just depends on what it is, and like how queer is it? Is it queer as in like only 1 in 10 people do it, or as in 1 in a million people do it, or are this thing, whatever? Depends. It can be just a little, it can be a lot. Depends on how you use it. And yesterday things were on just as usual meaning normally. I wonder if I've been changed in the night. Let me think. Was I the same when I got up this morning? I almost think I can remember feeling a little different. But if I'm not the same, the next question is, who in the world am I? That's the great puzzle. And she began thinking over all the children she knew that were the same age as herself to see if she could have changed for any of them. So I guess she's thinking for any of them, I think, because when you say change for it, I think in a way they're saying like trading, like when you get change for something, you give the difference, like what is different. So you have been put in a different place of somebody else. So like in Freaky Friday, or Freakier Friday, if you've seen that now. By the way, I finished my book I was reading. Now I'm on a nice, fancy, new edition of the original Freaky Friday, which from what I've heard doesn't actually give much of a reason for the actual why they switch, unlike the 3 different movies. But yeah, it even says it on here, so you can tell it's a newer edition about Freakier Friday. So that'll be interesting. That might be the kind of thing she's thinking. Like I'm not me at all. Like I've switched bodies. I'm like kind of like the mom and the daughter in Freaky Friday when they haven't looked in the mirror yet, or the stepdaughter, the grandmother, if you're talking about Freakier Friday. And my other book, as I already mentioned yesterday, that I'm now fully reading, so the finished Resisting Happiness, A History of Women and 101 Objects. I wonder if it says anything about which objects on the table of contents here. Dance card fan, Tupperware. There's a model of vacuum cleaner, a VHS tape of a particular VHS. Scissors. Respect by Aretha Franklin. Oh, what you want? Baby, I got it. That's the song that goes R-E-S-P-C-T, for those of y'all younger who haven't heard it. Oh, and the cell phone. So it'll be, and even Kim Kardashian's ring. So it'll be interesting to see how all this ties together. Like how many of these things are maybe things that women actually did make, or how they just really changed it or influenced it, or maybe changed it enough to make it where their influence is almost bigger on it than the person who made it. Who knows? But let's see. Back into it. Let's see if she has had a Freaky Friday swap. Just like my buddy Tea Turtle, my topsy-turvy reversible buddy Raph. Goes from cutesy, which is like, Raph, really? He wouldn't want anyone to think he was cute unless maybe a girl thought he was cute, like her eye. He'd be like, I'm tough. Let's see if she is. And I hope she's nice about these classmates, because sometimes little kids, they'll say things about people when they're just thinking, oh, I'm just describing them, and they don't realize they're kind of saying something a little bit mean. Like if you say like, oh, my mom's old, whenever you're just a little kid, you're not necessarily meaning in the sense that, oh, you're like 150. It's just they're a lot bigger than you, and they were born a long time before you, so to you that counts as old. So like if you took my age, 28, almost 29, and told Sherlock that, and if he wasn't thinking about, oh, well, she's a human, not a cat, you'd be like, man, you're ancient. Even though for a human, I'm not. But to a kid, that's like, what? They can't even imagine. So let's see if she does any of that. Mm-hmm. I'm sure I'm not Ada, she said, for her hair goes in such long ringlets, and mine doesn't go in ringlets at all. So that'd be my mom versus me. Curly hair. It's kind of needing a wash here. I'm going to take a shower in a bit. But my hair definitely does the ringlets thing whenever I do it right. And my mom's is more naturally straight. But she wishes it would do that, even though I'm like, too much work. Either way. And I'm sure I can't be Mabel, for I know all sorts of things. And she knows such a very little. Besides, she's a she, and I'm I. No idea how puzzling it all is. Okay, first off, if you switch, in your mind, because your brain is separate from the thoughts in your head are separate from the muscle that does it. Kind of like when you put a video game in, the video game that you stick in is different from the like PlayStation or Switch or whatever computer system that plays it. So yes, in our case, there's no real separating of those, but in this case, sometimes she was her, then she would still be saying I, because in her brain, her brain is still itself. Her mind, not her brain, the brain, the physical object, the mind is still itself, even if the body is not. So she would still be talking that way and not be saying, she is confusing. She reached out and touched the thing. Because in her head, especially if she didn't know it yet, she would be. That is an interesting way to think it. When is it technically me and when is it technically her? You are still I, even if you're in her body. So is she doing it, even if it's her hand? Like her hand did it, if it's her body, but is she still doing it because you're the one controlling it? Kind of like if someone had put strings on you like a puppet. They're the one making you wave, but your hand's the one actually waving. So, interesting thought. And then also, we don't need to comment on other people's knowledge and stuff like that. And plus, again, if your mind is here and you know that you're you and not her on the inside, then regardless of what she knows or doesn't know, you wouldn't know what she knows or doesn't know because you'd still only have what you have. So her in your body, she wouldn't suddenly know all these things because your brain would be out, your mind will be out and in her body. Anyway, but again, confused little girl who's scared and freaked out. So, you know, kind of like, again, when you're in a dream and you like only vaguely notice that stuff's weird, like it's happening, like the room's weirdly filling with chocolate milk or something, and you're just like, oh, okay. You're not really getting super excited or super scared or freaked out. You're just kind of, so that's happening. Until suddenly something clicks and then you instantly wake up. And then you slowly start to, oh. So, oh, she's not done talking about the knowing things. I'll try if I know all the things I used to know. Let me see. 4 times 5 is 12. Those who know your mathematics. And 4 times 6 is 13. And 4 times 7 is, oh dear, I shall never get to 20 at that rate. However, the multiplication table doesn't signify, meaning she means like, because signify kind of means like mean or show a sign of. So it's like, that doesn't mean anything. Doesn't signify. Let's try geography. I guess she knows at least a little bit that she clearly doesn't know her stuff fully anyway. So she's like, maybe that's not the best thing to test myself on because I don't know much of that to begin with. Geography. London is the capital of Paris and Paris is the capital of Rome. Okay, those are all cities. And Rome is no, that's all wrong, I'm certain. I must have been changed for Mabel. I'll try. Say, how doth the little... And she crossed her hands on her lap as she was saying a lesson. So, how doth the little... Because they used to make you, like, actually memorize. Like, if, say, your teacher gave you a poem, you'd have to actually memorize it, not just like, oh, write a thing about what you think about it, or the signals and stuff in it, or signs, and different parts of grammar. No, you'd have to just memorize it and spit it back out. It was, and not like, oh, hey, what's 5 times 5? Oh, that's 25. You'd have to say it exactly in a certain way. So let's see. And began to repeat it, but her voice sounded hoarse, so like rough, like when you can barely speak or have a cold or something. And strange, and the words did not come out the same as they used to do. How doth the little crocodile improve his shining tail, and pour the waters of the Nile on every golden scale? How cheerfully he seems to grin, how neatly spreads its claws, and how welcomes little fishes in with gently smiling jaws. I'm sure those are not the right words, said poor Alice. I wonder what she was looking into. If I figure it out before next time, I will let you know. Just all that typing might be a bit much right now, and I'm getting a little tired. I'm sure those are the right words, and poor Alice, her eyes filled with tears as she went on. I must be Mabel after all, and I shall have to go and live in the poky little house and have next to no toys to play with and oh, ever so many lessons to learn. No, I've made up my mind about it. If I'm Mabel, I'll stay down here. I'll be of no use putting their heads down and saying, come up again, dear. I shall only look up and say, who am I then? Tell me that first, and then if I like being that person, I'll come up. If not, I'll stay down here till I'm somebody else. But oh dear, I guess if all this stuff has happened to you, you might be like, hey, if I'm her right now, I may as well be somebody else later, so I may as well wait instead of having to do someone else's job. Like if you had to be the garbage man and that was not the job you wanted, because that's a job that you have to be particular to be okay with being, you might sit there and wait and be like, hey, I might not like being, say, a chef because I'm not very good at cooking, but it might be better than being that. But she needs to be nicer because there are reasons people know certain different things, and especially back in the day, you didn't have a lot of things where like we have the internet where we can access a lot of stuff for free even that other people can't, and our libraries are closer and we can reach things and help each other more than they did in the past. So you don't make fun of people for that, especially if it has to do with how much money they have, not on actual, because if no one taught me to speak Spanish, I wouldn't be speaking Spanish. No habla español si nadie enseñado me. I know that was really bad coming out of my head. I'm still working on the actual, thinking off the top of my head and coming out. Because writing it down, I'm much better at getting it exact. I'm still working on my in-person practice, even though I understand everything. Okay, let's see. As she said this, she looked down at her hands and was surprised to see what she put on. She had put on one of the rabbit's little white kid gloves while she was talking. How can I have done that? She thought. I must be growing small again. Yeah, because that rabbit was definitely not her size. She got up. Oh, and by the way, I never showed you. There's no rabbit. She got up and went to the She got up and went to the table to measure herself by it, and found that as nearly as she could guess, she was now about 2 feet high and was going on shrinking rapidly. She soon found out that the cause of this was the fan she was holding, and she dropped it hastily, just in time to save herself from shrinking away altogether. That was a narrow escape, said Alice, in a very good deal frightened at the sudden change and very glad to find herself still in existence. Like, at least she didn't go poof. And now for the garden. She ran with all speed back to the little door, but alas, the little door was shut again, and the little golden key was lying on the glass table as before, and things are worse than ever, thought the poor child, for I never was so small as this before, never. So apparently when she shrank even more than she had before. And I declare it's too bad, but it is bad that it is. As she said these words, her foot slipped in, and in another moment, splash, she was up to her chin in salt water. Ooh, where do you think that came from? Her first idea was that she had somehow fallen into the sea. Good thought. But it's like, why is this ocean water in here? And in that case, I can go back by railway, she said to herself. Alice had been to the seaside once in her life and had come to a general conclusion that wherever you go to on the English coast, you find the number of bathing machines in the sea. Some children bathing machines. I can see bathing suits, but bathing machines, interesting. Unless she's kind of like talking about something that swims. And some children digging in the sand with wooden spades. Spades in this case being a shovel. Then a row of lodging houses, so I guess cabin kind of things, and behind them a railway station. However, she soon made out that she was in a pool of tears because of all that crying she did, which she had wept when she was 9 feet tall. I wish I hadn't cried so much, said Alice as she swam about trying to find her way out. At least she can swim. I shall be punished for it now, I suppose, by being drowned in my own tears. Usually you don't mean that literally. Usually you're being hyperbolic, but in this case, it makes sense. That will be a queer thing, to be sure. There's that word again. However, everything is queer today. Just then, sometimes you just have a weird day. Usually not this weird, but still. Just then, she heard something splashing about in a pool a little way off, and she swam near to make out what it was. At first, she thought it would be a walrus or hippopotamus. Weird to find in England, but okay. Then she remembered how small she was now, and she soon made out that it was only a mouse, and that she had slipped in, that had slipped in that had slipped in like herself. Would it be of any use now, thought Alice, to speak to this mouse? Everything is so out of the way down here that I should think it very likely it can talk. At any rate, there's no harm in trying. So she began, "Oh, mouse, do you know the way out of this pool? I'm very tired of swimming about here. Oh, mouse." Alice thought this must be the right way of speaking to a mouse. She had never done such a thing before, but she remembered having seen in her brother's Latin grammar, so where he was learning Latin, his Latin learning book, like how you might have a Spanish workbook or a Mandarin workbook or such. A mouse of a mouse to a mouse, oh mouse. The mouse looked at her rather inquisitively, although I don't know what that'd have to do with it talking to a mouse, and seemed to her to wink with one of its little eyes, but it said nothing. Perhaps it doesn't understand English, thought Alice. I dare say it's a French mouse. Come over with William the Conqueror, for with all her knowledge of history, Alice had no very clear notion how long ago anything had happened, so she must think like the Vikings and stuff were like 2 minutes ago and things like that. She began again, "Oui, et ma chat," which is, "Where's my cat?" I know that much because I can understand French. I still need to work more on that one than Spanish. The mouse gave a sudden leap out of the water. Yeah, because where's my cat? No cat. And seemed to quiver all over with fright. Oh, I'm almost there. But here, do real quick so we don't have any drops. Gave a sudden leap out of the water and seemed to quiver all over with fright. "Oh, I beg your pardon," cried Alice hastily. So quickly, ah! Afraid that she had hurt the poor animal's feelings. "I quite forgot you didn't like cats." "Not like cats," cried the mouse in a shrill, kind of scared, high-pitched, passionate voice. Would you like cats if you were me? Sorry, Sherlock. Well, perhaps not, said Alice in a soothing tone. Don't be angry about it, and yet I wish I could show you our cat Dinah. I think you'd take a fancy to cats if you could only see her. She's such a dear, quiet thing, yet around things that aren't mice. Alice went on, half to herself, and so she swam lazily about in the pool, and she sits purring so nicely by the fire, licking her paws and washing her face, and she's such a nice, soft thing to nurse. Nurse meaning like to feed from a bottle. Oh, I beg your pardon. I'm sorry. Excuse me. Dear Alice, again, cried Alice again. For this time, the mouse was bristling all over, like its hair was standing on end, like it's kind of scared. Like when a cat's fur gets up when it gets ready to hiss or something. We won't talk about her anymore if you'd rather not. Well, indeed, cried the mouse, who was trembling down to his tail, so like shaking, like down to the end of his tail. As if I would talk on such a subject. Our family always hated cats, nasty, low, vulgar things. Again, shy Sherlock. Don't let me hear the name again. I won't indeed, said Alice in a great hurry to change the subject of conversation. Are you fond of dogs? The mouse did not answer, so Alice went on eagerly, like excitedly, like, ooh. There is such a nice little dog near our house. I should like to show you. A little bright-eyed terrier, you know, with, oh, such long, curly brown hair, and it'll fetch things when you throw them, and it'll sit up and beg for its dinner, and all sorts of things. I can't remember half of them, and it belongs to a farmer, you know, and he says it's so useful, it's worth £100. He says it kills all the rats, and oh, dear, cried Alice in a sorrowful tone, I'm afraid I've offended it, meaning hurt its feelings. Like, it's just like, why are you saying that? For the mouse was swimming away from her as hard as it could and making quite a commotion in the pool as it went. So she called softly after it, Mouse, dear, do come back again and we won't talk about cats or dogs either if you don't like them. When the mouse heard this, it turned and swam slowly back to her. Its face was quite pale, like when it's scared. With passion, Alice thought. Like, whoa, it's so pale. Like, it kind of freaked her out. That's why it says with passion, like... Passion, like a lot of feeling. And it said in a low, trembling voice, let us get to the shore, and then I'll tell you my history, and you'll understand why it is I hate cats and dogs. It was high time to go, for the pool was getting quite crowded with the birds and animals that had fallen into it. There was a duck and a dodo, if y'all have seen the movie, trying to see where we're at, a lory and an eaglet, and several other curious creatures. Alice led the way, and the whole party swam to the shore. Seems to be that it's a lot of birds, and then in the picture it seems like rodents and crabs and monkeys maybe. On the next one we'll get into it. A caucus race and a long tail. We'll talk about a caucus race soon. It's a legal thing, kind of like voting and stuff, like a presidential race kind of thing. It's kind of like that kind of thing. So we will get into that soon. And I can't wait. Remember, the vocabulary is going to be down at the bottom if you would like to continue studying that, along with my website's link if you want to look for any other options for stories and things that you might like yourself. And again, remember, it's pretty easy to get a hold of a copy at a library or free online and different things like that, or very cheap because it's a public domain story. And we shall see how this goes. If I know you or if I don't. Happy Pet Memorial Day. And tomorrow's grilled cheese day, so I'm going to be sure to be having plenty of that myself. I miss my old babies. Let's see, my Mark, Poe, I might have said this yesterday, all the Poes. Zach, Lenny, was just sending up a good message to them across the Rainbow Bridge. The guinea pigs, Zach and Lenny. Dipsy, Eric, Ariel, and Rainbow. Max, Jamie, Prissy, Lala, and Jakey, the dogs and cats, and then my grandmother's dogs that I spent so much time with on the river, Maggie and Boomer. And my cousin will remember, Tyler will remember us making a giant hairball, just petting him, sitting in the truck, driving there a few summers, just because it took so long to get there, and his hair just comes off so easy, yellow lab. Anyway, see ya.